think we can all agree that 2020 has been a challenge, so we decided to take a deep dive into history and see how it compares with other years when it was a tough go. It turns out some historians say when you look at the absolute hardest times to be alive, this year isn't even on the radar. Joining me for a look at some of them is Professor of History at the University of Toronto, Nicholas Everett. Nicholas, great to meet you.
Good. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to start with the year 536, which sounds like something straight out of an apocalyptic scenario. Tell me what happened here.
A lot of people have cited 536 because there's some reports in chronicles from both China and Europe that the year was darkened, that the sun went dark for a year, which made a really difficult agricultural cycle. And there's some evidence for famine that followed soon afterwards. The dendrochronology supports this. From tree rings, both in Russia and in Iceland, suggests that around this time, the temperature did actually drop by a couple of degrees. And that could be disastrous in a pre-industrial economy for a couple of generations. So it was particularly alarming. But we still really don't know the cause of it. People have suggested volcanic explosions were the culprit and caused a sort of global blockout of the sun. But the evidence for which volcano and when is still pretty inconclusive. So at the moment, it's still on the table. But I think what's most important is that 536 comes in a really bad time. For the ancient world falling apart, the Roman Empire's falling apart. And only 5 years after this, in 541, you have something called the Justinianic Plague, the first bubonic plague that really hits Europe. And that was quite devastating for some cities around the Mediterranean. And on top of this, as I said, the Roman Empire falling apart with barbarian successor states and big changes like Christianity becoming the dominant religion and dominant landowner in Europe at the time too. So a series of changes, and 536 sits right in the middle of them.
Nicholas, we're going to jump ahead to 1348. So why are we pointing this year out?
1348 is another pandemic there. We just mentioned the bubonic plague of the Justinian period. This is known as the Black Death. It's a much more devastating plague across Europe. It strikes, as you said, in 1348, and it was sheer terror, I think, in the sources of the period from the witnesses that were described the plague, and also in the artwork that you're just showing up there on your screen. I think the psychological terror of the plague in that period is very evident, particularly because it constantly recurs. I don't think there's a year in Europe without the plague until the 17th century after that. So one never knew it was going to come back. And the artwork also spells out that picture. You never knew who it was coming for. It didn't matter whether you were rich or poor, saint or sinner. It could strike anyone at any time.
Nicholas, we talk about these awful events in history, but the silver lining here is that we always bounce back. We come back from them.
Yeah, in both cases, it seems there's something of a resurgence. It takes a little while. I think population models suggest that if you have something like 40% of the population wiped out, it'll take you about a decade to get back up at a 2-3% increase per year. But it does come back. And certainly with the bubonic plague and the Justinianic plague, we do see a kind of resettling and a resurgence. It's certainly a change of order. It seems some of the old structures give way to something new. In case of Justinianic plague, it's the Roman Empire giving way to something new. And in the bubonic plague, it's really the end of the sort of feudal order and the emergence of the early modern world.
Nicholas, thank you so much for coming on this morning and sharing your perspective.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.